This video includes sensitive content, including brief images taken after Lisa McPherson's death. Please watch with care.
She died because she wouldn't succumb to their rules or their instruction. She wanted out. There's more than 2 people that know that she wanted out, and she refused to give up. And they've just let her die.
30 years ago, on December the 5th, 1995, a woman named Lisa McPherson died after 17 days under the exclusive care and authority of the Church of Scientology. Her final days unfolded behind locked doors, in silence, under a program created by L. Ron Hubbard called the Introspection Rundown, a procedure designed to handle psychosis without medical treatment. Her autopsy revealed severe dehydration, organ stress, and a fatal pulmonary embolism. Her medical records showed a body shutting down. Her caretaker logs showed a woman deteriorating. Her police file showed destroyed reports and contradictory statements. And her Scientology ethics file revealed years of pressure, guilt, self-blame, and relentless internal policing. This is the full story of Lisa's life, her decline and her death, told through the documents Scientology never wanted you to see. In this video, I want to tell you the story of Lisa McPherson, not just as a case or a headline, but as a whole human being, a daughter, a sister, a friend, long before she ever became a statistic in Scientology's history. A lot of us only first heard Lisa's name connected to her horrific death in 1995. But by the time she died in room 174 of the Fort Harrison Hotel, her life had already been shaped for decades by trauma, and then by an organisation that promised to fix that trauma while quietly tightening its grip on her mind. Lisa McPherson was born in 1959 in Dallas, Texas. She grew up in what from the outside looked like a very ordinary American family. But behind that normal surface, her childhood was punctuated by pain. According to accounts later gathered by her family and advocates, Lisa was sexually abused by a neighbour when she was very young. That kind of violation doesn't just go away. It shapes how a child sees safety, trust, and their own body. When Lisa was 14, something happened that no teenager should ever have to live through. Her beloved older brother Steve, just 16 years old, walked into a petrol station restroom and shot himself. The details of that day are still blurry, even for the family. But Lisa's aunt has said very clearly, Steve's suicide traumatised the whole family. Her father never recovered. 10 years later, history repeated itself. Lisa's father, J.T. McPherson, also died by suicide, again using a gun. So by her mid-20s, Lisa had survived sexual abuse, lost her brother to suicide, and then lost her father the same way. Those are not small blows. They are the kind of unresolved trauma that any decent system of care would treat with compassion, professional help, and long-term support. Instead, Lisa was about to walk straight into a group that declares war on psychiatry, relabels trauma as charges and overts, and blames the victim for their own suffering. In 1977, Lisa graduated from Bryan Adams High School in Dallas with honours, finishing 60th out of 743 students. She was not stupid. She was intelligent, driven, and social. She didn't go to college, but she went straight into the workforce. Her family describes her as vivacious, a brown-eyed blonde who liked frosting her hair, who could do well at work, and wanted more from life. She took a job at Southwestern Bell, and that's where the next big turning point happened. At Southwestern Bell, one of Lisa's supervisors was a Scientologist. Through that connection, Lisa was introduced to Dianetics and Scientology courses. Now, I just want to quickly set the stage here because the language matters later. Scientology grew out of L. Ron Hubbard's 1950s book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health. In that book, Hubbard claimed he discovered the real mechanics of the mind, that our suffering comes from engrams, recordings of painful experiences in a reactive mind. He promised that if you followed his techniques and paid for his counselling, you could become clear, free of irrational fears, free of psychosomatic illnesses, with higher IQ and a stable, happy mind. For someone like Lisa, with a history of abuse, family suicides, and no real mental health support, that promise must have sounded like a lifeline. And Scientology doesn't just sell ideas, it sells belonging. New recruits are love-bombed. They're told they're special, that they're brave for seeking truth, that they're on a spiritual path to total freedom. She was in deep quickly. In 1979, at about 20 years old, Lisa married Donald Boss, who was 37. That marriage didn't last. By 1982, the relationship had ended. Around this same period, she was doing more Scientology courses, she was working, and she was still carrying the unresolved grief of losing both brother and father. Not long after her father died by suicide in 1983, she remarried, this time to Eugene Skonetsky, a fellow Scientologist. They moved to Los Angeles for a while, and then she ended up back in Dallas, where she worked at the Celebrity Center for a while. In 1985, she took a job at a mortgage company run by Scientologists. Her life was now completely intertwined with the group, working with Scientologists, social life with Scientologists, spiritual life dictated by Scientology ethics and tech. By 1988, the strain was visible on paper. She filed for divorce from Skonetsky. She filed for bankruptcy, listing about $45,000 in debt. And in the middle of all this, she joined Scientology's elite Sea Organization. Sea Org members sign a billion-year contract, pledging themselves to Scientology for this lifetime and all future lifetimes. They used to wear naval-style uniforms. They work incredibly long hours and are paid next to nothing, often around $50 a week. The stated purpose of the Sea Org is to get ethics in on this planet. In practice, it's a tight, militaristic control structure where orders are absolute. Lisa's Sea Org career was short. She left within about a year and went back to being a public Scientologist. But that billion-year contract tells us something important. Even if she physically left the Sea Org, psychologically she'd already said, "You own my eternity." Now I want to zoom in on something that most documentaries barely touch. Lisa's ethics files, the OW write-ups, the knowledge reports, the early conditioned formulas. Because if you really want to understand why she was so broken by 1995, you have to see how her mind was trained in the early 80s. Over the years, Scientology kept thick files on Lisa. We have many of those documents thanks to the Lisa Files archive and court records. This is how the system works in Scientology. If you see something off in another member, you're expected to file a knowledge report or a KR on them. If you are seen as a problem, you're hauled into ethics and told to write up your OWs, your overts and withholds, all the bad things you've done, especially anything harmful or critical towards Scientology. You're also assigned ethics conditions, things like liability, doubt, enemy, and to get out of them you have to do formulas. Confess, make amends, and publicly agree that the group was right and you were wrong. On paper, it looks like self-improvement. In practice, it's a surveillance and confession system. From 1982 through the mid-80s, Lisa's file starts filling up, with knowledge reports written about her by other Scientologists, and OW write-ups she writes about herself. In those OWs, Lisa is made to list out every sin, from sexual behaviour to tiny workplace errors, frame her own feelings and doubts as evidence of her out ethics, and constantly conclude that the answer is more Scientology, more tech, more compliance. When she struggles in relationships or has trouble at work or feels overwhelmed emotionally, the solution is, "You've been abused and traumatised. Let's support you." it's always you are PTS, a potential trouble source, connected to suppressive people. You have overts. You need to do more conditions, more write-ups, more intensive auditing. At one point, Lisa was even pushed into identifying her own mother as a suppressive person. Not because her mother was harmful, but because she was worried about Lisa's debts and involvement in Scientology. Under the PTS system, that concern was reinterpreted as suppressive, and it left Lisa effectively disconnected from the last parental figure she had. It added yet another emotional layer to her trauma. Every document we have from those years reinforces the same message. If something's wrong, it's your fault. That doesn't mean she was only punished. There was a carrot as well as a stick. In her files, we also see a long list of commendations, about 40 separate commendations and letters spanning from the mid-80s into the 90s. These commendations praise her for working long hours, recruiting, fundraising, being upstat and dedicated. So this is the pattern. She's pushed to meet impossible quotas and standards. When she inevitably struggles, she's hit with chaos and ethics. She writes page after page of self-blame in OWs. Then, when she pulls herself together and overproduces, she gets a glowing commendation. It's essentially carrot and stick conditioning. Criticism and shaming when she fails, praise and euphoric validation when she overcomplies. Even used that technique during her marriage to Eugene. You can track exactly how they used Gene to shape Lisa's thinking. Love bombing when the marriage aligned with production. Rollercoaster punishments when she or the marriage dipped. Ethics control, making her confess everything as her fault. Isolation and dependency, making the marriage problems proof Lisa needed Scientology more. Self-blame, conditioning, dismantling her self-esteem, one ethics report at a time. Scientology even has its own term for the emotional chaos that this kind of pattern produces. Rollercoastering. They blame the member for rollercoastering. When you look at these files, it's clear that the organisation itself is creating the rollercoaster. From a psychological point of view, this kind of intermittent approval and punishment is extremely powerful. Over time, it can break down a person's sense of stable self, make them addicted to the group's approval, and train them to interpret every problem as proof that they are defective and the organisation is always right. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Lisa's life is almost entirely inside the Scientology bubble. She's worked for Scientology. She's worked for Scientology-run companies. She's had multiple Scientologist partners and husbands. She's served briefly in the Sea Org. Her inner world is full of Hubbard's language, PTS, SPs, overts, withholds, engrams, conditions, stats. In 1991, in a small but telling moment, Lisa actually wrote to the Cult Awareness Network, an anti-cult organisation that Scientology was aggressively attacking at the time. Many Scientologists were trying to infiltrate CAN.
Air game attack on CAN started in the 1980s, and Stacey Young says she was part of it.
Some of the staff who were assigned to the Cult Awareness Network would brief us about
there were
some
people
of the...
specifically assigned.
Oh, yes. That was their whole job. That was all they did.
Was CAN.
Was CAN. That's right. And so our whole orientation was, well, what have you done this week to get rid of CAN? And how well have you done to discredit the leaders of CAN? How much progress have you made on disrupting this group?
Whether Lisa's letter was part of that operation or a tiny flicker of doubt, it shows how caught she was between different narratives of what Scientology really is. Meanwhile, her career continues to be tied to the church. In 1994, her employer, AMC Publishing, a Scientology-owned business, moves from Dallas to Clearwater, Florida, the spiritual headquarters of Scientology, known as the Flag Land Base. Lisa moves with them. That year alone, records show she donated tens of thousands of dollars to Scientology for services and donations, more than many people earn in a year. She's praised in letters for helping fund events like Scientology's Winter Wonderland PR display in Clearwater. On the outside, she looks like a high success story. High income, celebrated in commendations, climbing Scientology's bridge. But on the inside, she's a woman with a lifetime of trauma, now conditioned to blame herself for every doubt, every struggle, every slump in production, and to see the organisation as the only solution. This is the Lisa who walks into 1995. The Lisa who is about to be declared clear, and then told she's a liability. The Lisa who will tell a friend, "I think I'm going crazy," and whose final cry for help will be to walk naked down a Florida street after crashing into a boat trailer.